is that as she's beginning to have these burgeoning emotions and she's becoming newly assertive, she wants him to also become assertive as well. You know, all of that sort of self-deprecation of I'll never be good enough for you, I'll never be good enough for you. That's kind of gross after a while. It's like, okay, well then tell me why I'm with you. You know, like don't tell me that you're never going to be good enough, because now that makes me second guess my choice that I chose you. And I think that she probably challenged him a good bit. Probably poked and prodded him, trying to get him to become bigger, to bow up, to like draw himself up to his full height and really tell her how it was. I'm sure she would have thought that was attractive. There's something attractive about a man who knows his place in the world. You know, not a bully. I'm not talking about like being a bully, but somebody who can lead effectively and who is strong and masculine and knows the right way and is willing to take the chances and is willing to take you by the hand and take you with him. But somebody who's all the day long sort of like cowering in the corner and being like, I know, I'm sorry, you know, rocking back and forth, you know, beating himself up and marinating in his own disgust and self-reproach. I mean, nobody wants to be married to that. Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cheer Denise, and today we are doing Chapter 5 of the Mountbattens. This chapter is called Honeymoon. So if you'll recall, the last chapter they had gotten engaged against the better judgment of the adults around them. They'd only known each other for 4 months. Dicky was only 21. Edwina was, I think, 29. She was 20 at the time. And so they were very young to be making this decision. But you'll also recall that they have both lost significant people in their lives, and this really aided in throwing them together, and also aided in sort of hiding from them maybe who they really were. Like, they were so distracted by the fact that they both had each other in their moment of grief that they weren't really paying attention to the fact that they actually weren't a very good fit together. Dicky and Edwina ran in the same circles, but their interests and what they like to do were very different. And that's going to become appallingly clear in this chapter. You'll also remember from the last chapter that Edwina has shown some of her true colors, and they ugly. I think the thing with Edwina is just that she seems so self-centered. I think she realized fairly young, particularly on that trip across Europe, that she had the gift of catching male attention. And she liked that feeling. It really was something that she went after. She seems like she was an incredibly insecure person who needed to have men tell her what her worth was. Such a detrimental place to find yourself. But that's where she is. And so, of course, Dicky is this exuberant young man. He is highly popular. People like him. They get along with him. He seems to be able to find his way into the highest echelons of society through his charm. And so I think that having somebody like that choose you would have been flattering. And almost like, well, if they're so into me, like maybe I need to buy into them as well. Like, I mean, they clearly see something that they like here. Maybe I don't know exactly all there is to know about them, but I'm loving the attention and I want to keep getting it. Unfortunately, once they're married, she's going to realize that just getting the attention from one man isn't all that exciting, and that she actually would prefer to continue to live, you know, in a world of gaiety where, you know, she's flirting with all these different men and all these different guys are vying for her attention as they were during her debutante year. The thing is that season is over in life. You know, that doesn't go on and on forever, and it's not intended to. And people are going to become a little bit tired of her ways by the end of this chapter. Anyway, I've talked and talked. Thank you all who continue to show up for these episodes. I'm loving this book, and I'm so glad that so many of you are too. If you've been watching the videos but you haven't subscribed, or you haven't had a chance to like a video or leave a comment, please do. Helps the algorithm, and it helps other people find this book as well. All right, let's jump into it. The name of this chapter, like I said, is Honeymoon. Okay, so they've gotten married, and the book says that most couples return to their private lives after the public spectacle of a wedding. But the Mountbattens' marriage marked simply the start of a life where private life and public appearances would often be merged. Their first 4 days of honeymoon at Broadlands was hardly spent alone, with a church fair in the grounds of Broadlands and a visit to the cinema in Romsey to see the Pathé film of the wedding. Dicky himself, who liked to be the center of attention, talked of the wedding being like a movie. The honeymoon was to be no different. And you'll recall that Dicky really did like movies. He liked cinema, he liked film. His brother had gotten him into that when he and his brother were both serving on the same battleship for a bit. And his brother would get different films for the crew to watch. And so Dicky had really come to love film then. So the idea of having had a movie made about their wedding and the whole thing was filmed at a time when that obviously wouldn't have been the norm was very exciting for Dicky. He loved that. After hosting a party for the Prince of Wales and Fruity Metcalf, a questionable fellow, the couple left in the new Rolls Royce. The chauffeur, Rasdil, and Edwina's maid, Weller, squashed in the back with the luggage for the first part of their 4-month honeymoon. 4 months? Oh, the life they do lead. Their first stop was Paris, which represented for Edwina freedom and sophistication, and the main suite at the Ritz Hotel. "It's marvelous, Mama dear, being married," Dicky wrote to his mother. "Quite the best thing I've ever done, or am likely to do." Now, here's the thing. This is what we need to recall about Dicky this entire chapter. Plant this firmly in your minds. Dicky thinks so little of himself that, in his mind, to have landed Edwina, Ashley, is the greatest coup of his life. Like, how did he manage to do it? He's not asking any questions, but he's shocked and loving it. I think he thinks that he is next to nothing. Financially, yes. But because he isn't able to give her the same financial status that she is going to be giving him, I think he already felt sort of down about it. And I think that because she is very popular and she was the number one girl to get of her debutante year, I think he just is sort of like fumbling around wondering how he managed it and sort of having imposter syndrome. And he's told her over and over again, I'm just this poor sinner. I don't know how I managed to stumble. I fell ass backwards into this one. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of your love. And that's the narrative of their life. Like, he has let her know, I'm less than you. And he firmly believes that. Well, nobody wants to be married to somebody who they think isn't their equal and who invites them to think, I am not your equal. And that's really going to come back to burn him. I think he thought that was really a romantic thing to say. And maybe to have said it one time would have been, I suppose, a compliment to her, if you wanted to look at it that way. But to continually repeat that, not only to her, but to his mother, and then, presumably he repeats it to himself continually, it's really going to set up this dynamic in their marriage where she's going to start wondering, like, yeah, why am I with you? All right, well, one of the problems, far apart from that, was just the fact that they were both just very different people, and so they wanted their honeymoon to be a very different experience. Dicky was a planner. Dicky loved to set out schedules and have an itinerary, and he knew exactly where we were going, where we're eating, what we're doing. Probably the military man in him had created that sort of dynamic. My husband is also like that. He likes an itinerary. He likes to know exactly what we're doing, where we're doing, how we're doing it, how long it's going to take. And I am a free spirit, my friends. And I don't care if I know every last detail of every last thing. In fact, I would rather not have every last detail planned. And Edwina was of this sort. She had had years of close supervision, and she wasn't about to have her honeymoon be planned out to the nth degree. So that they clashed over that because she wanted to just be freewheeling, and he's like, yeah, but here's the plan. We need to go by the plan. He was proven right, though, because their next stop was Spain, where Dicky had carefully mapped out routes and overnight stops, much to the dismay of Edwina, who wanted to be the free spirit, and she would have preferred some spontaneity and consultation on this plan. He just is going to tell her where she's going to go. It's her honeymoon, too. So, to please her, Dicky canceled his bookings to find at their first stop, Tours, the only accommodation being a tiny attic room at a small hotel. After a sleepless night, Edwina agreed to let him pre-book in the future. First of all, let me tell you something right now. Even though I am a free spirit, at the end of the day, it is sort of nice to know where you're going to lay your head. And so in my relationship, in my marriage, at first I was like, stop telling me what to do all the time. You're not my dad. But then I realized, hey, you know what? If he likes to do it and there is, peace and there's no chaos, if we do have a plan, let him do it, And once I stopped acting like my rights had been taken from me because he wanted to have a plan, I started enjoying his plans. Seems that Edwina also realized these things. All right, their tour across Europe continues. They go to Spain, they go to Germany, they find their way back into Paris. Interestingly, when they were in Germany, the old friend Peter Murphy pops up. That was Dicky's Cambridge friend, who I think he's going to come back again and again to haunt us. He had become sort of a confidant of Dicky's, and remember, he was a lot more politically left-leaning than Dicky was at the time. So he really was like opening Dicky's eyes to the ways of the world. He shows up, he entertains him for a hot second, and then mysteriously disappears, and we don't know what happened to him. Anyway, they find themselves back in Paris, and the young couple are joined at the Ritz by Georgie and Nada. Remember, Georgie is Dicky's brother, and Nada is his sister-in-law, for a much more exciting 3 days of cocktails and nightclubs before they returned to London at the end of August. But they weren't done partying yet. I mean, okay, that was just the first part of the honeymoon, you guys, okay? But he has to go back to work, Dicky does. But then he had taken leave on half pay until November, and he was now able to take up the second part of his honeymoon. They decided to take a trip across America. Let me tell you what, they had big times in America, all right? They did all the things you were supposed to be doing during the 1920s. Interestingly, on the trip to America, they went on this big passenger ship called the Majestic. A huge suite obtained for the price of a single cabin because of the publicity of them traveling on that ship. So even back in the day, those influencers were getting their cut. Anyway, press attention was something that they were to generate throughout their American stay. In New York, they gave a press conference. Why, you might ask? They're just a couple of rich people. Who cares? They dined with the composer Jerome Kern, went to the cinema with Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford. They saw the Ziegfeld Follies. They danced with Paul Whiteman's Big Show Band. They watched a baseball game with Babe Ruth. And they rode the roller coaster at Coney Island 9 times. Big times in America. But here's the thing. You just wonder, like, why are Americans so obsessed with rich people from overseas? Like, why are they showing up here giving a press conference? Who gives a damn? Like, really and truly, I don't understand. Like, what is the point of this? I don't understand why they feel like they need to be sort of ferried about. I mean, I guess, rich people do tend to hang around with each other. So are we surprised that they're hanging out with Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford and going to see Babe Ruth at a baseball game? Not really. But I will say that there's other things that do surprise me about this tour. Dicky, by the way, had been to the United States before. Edwina, this is her first time. And their trip, which had been organized by a wealthy family friend, Robert Thompson, who we have heard about before, he was a good friend of Prince of Wales. And when they were, living their ostracized life in the Bahamas, they would pop into America all the time, and they would see this aging railroad tycoon, and he would help them out. But nobody actually really knew who Robert Thompson was at that time because he was kind of like an old name that had sort of died out. Anyway, he makes his debut in this book, this Robert Thompson does. And he had a big hand in organizing Edwina and Dicky's trip. But this is what I'm saying to you. I don't understand what they're doing in America, because one of the things that they did on this trip was they went to Chicago to go and view a meat packing factory. If I come to America all the way across from the Atlantic, am I going to show up in Chicago to go look at a meat packing factory? Isn't that what The Jungle was written about? Do I want to go and live a scene of The Jungle? I finally get set foot on the promised land, and then I'm going to go hightail it to Chicago to hang around on the slippery, bloodied floors of a meat factory? Please. And then, they go and they tour some power stations. They go to some museums. That makes some good sense. But, some of the things they're doing seem almost like royal, when royalty comes and they, are, giving a tour of this and giving a tour of that. I don't understand what Dicky and Edwina are doing at the meat packing factory or at the power plant. What? Why? They did do some normal things. They visited with Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. They also were introduced to Charlie Chaplin. Dicky said that Charlie Chaplin was the most lovable, shy, and pathetic little man, yet full of humor, and that he kept them all amused by the hour. More absurdity continues, because while they're in America, well, what else are you going to do but make your own movie? So while they're there, I guess they're in California, Cecil B. DeMille showed them the sets of his new film at Paramount Studios. And then they all decided that they would make their own film. Why? They called it Nice and Friendly, centering around Edwina's abduction by Colonel Thompson and rescue by Chaplin, with bit parts for Dicky as her lover, child star Jackie Coogan, and even their own valet Thorogood in the role of a disdainful butler. Okay, well, I guess they had big times. All right, well, they make their way back to the East Coast after goofing off in California for a little bit. And Dicky is to give an address to the Navy League dinner in Washington on Navy Day. That makes good sense. I mean, he is in the Navy. But what doesn't make sense is they go and have a visit with President Warren G. Harding. Why? Why does he want to spend time with them? They're just a couple of rich people from England. It isn't like a prince has arrived on shore. I don't understand why the president is taking time out of his day for these people. All right, well, when they're done wasting the president's time, they stumble over to the Vanderbilts and hang out with them for 10 days, where Edwina celebrated her 21st birthday. You guys, 21st birthday. These little chickens are just youngsters. A couple of little chicks that just hatched, and they're stumbling all over the world doing all kinds of things, which does suddenly cast a new light on why they were making films in California and goofing around on set. You know, they are only 21. The book goes on to say that it was not only Edwina, but Dicky who had come of age. Both blossomed, learning to work a crowd and politely answer the most inane questions, notably about their wealth and future. They had enjoyed the attention. The press called them prince and princess. Of course, the American press did. We're always getting it wrong. The openness and the hospitality. They had made many friends in the United States, and they developed new passions such as spirituals and jazz. America was, in future, to be another escape from the more curtailed lives in Britain to which they were about to return. Meantime, Dicky's got job problems. World War I had left Britain in a really bad financial way. The book says that the national debt had risen to £677 million in 1910 and to $7.8 billion in 1922, larger than the country's GDP. Something had to be done. Sir Eric Geddes was appointed to look into cutting public expenditure. He recommended reductions in public spending of £87 million, with much of it falling on defense. The budget was cut by 42% in 1 year, and especially the Navy. It meant that 350 lieutenants would have to be retired. The view was taken that those with private incomes should be the first to be culled, and it looked like Dicky's career might be over before it had even begun. Got to cut out that fat. The thing is, Dicky had friends in high places. The Admiral Earl Chatfield had Dicky as his, quote, doggy, which is really his ADC and his errand boy. So he put in a good word for Dicky. Like, let's not let that boy go. He has the makings of a quality naval officer. And then, of course, Prince of Wales spoke to his father. And his brother Georgie, who also had a good career in the Navy, also argued that they needed to keep Dicky on. And further, Dicky had tried to become the director of a gramophone company, ran that into the ground. So it was clear that they couldn't cut him loose from the Navy because he showed promise as a Navy officer, could not manage to run a business. So let's not throw the poor boy out. Still, though, many of Dicky's contemporaries saw him as a rich playboy, a lightweight, more interested in accompanying the Prince of Wales on tour and making films in Hollywood than his naval career. But by the end of 1923, more than half the officers from Dicky's year had left the service. Saved by his influential contacts, he was not one of them, but he knew that if he was to survive and prosper in the Navy, he would have to excel. He really couldn't keep doing these fun little tours with the Prince of Wales and, jet setting here, there, and everywhere because it was starting to look bad. So, duty calls. In January 1923, Dicky was posted to the battleship Revenge, part of the international fleet in the Dardanelles, to deal with the problem in the Balkans. Edwina, Peter, Murphy, John, and Marjorie Bruckneck accompanied him by train to Paris, where they spent a few days visiting the night spots of the capital, presenting his wife with a toy rabbit called Bun. Dicky then caught another train to Constantinople. It was the first time that they had been apart since marrying 6 months earlier. I don't understand these little... He always gives her a little gift. One time it made sense, he gave her a watch so she could mark the time. But what'd she want with a toy rabbit called Bun? Anyway, I guess he was running out of good ideas. You'll find out later what else he gave her, and it's even weirder than a toy rabbit, but we'll get to it. The captain of the Revenge, Gilbert Stevenson, had initially asked the Admiralty not to post Mountbatten because he thought that Dicky was not serious about his career, and it just seemed to him like, I can't spend my life trying to babysit this child, But he found that he'd been wrong. He wrote, "Directly I saw the man at work, I realized how tremendously intelligent he was, how full of life and vivacity. He had the gift of getting on with people. People, in other words, wanted to do what he wanted them to do. And after all, that's a very valuable gift in anybody, especially an officer. He was, in fact, the most successful of all my officers when handling difficult men, though you would hardly have expected him to afford them the time they needed." Dicky did know how to deal with people. He was a people person, and we've seen, that is how he has scaled the heights thus far. He knows how to be what you need him to be, and yet at the same time getting you to be what he needs you to be. Dicky made a point of knowing all 160 men in his division, preparing details of each with their career and background. He gave prizes for good shooting, until it was pointed out that other officers could not afford to do the same. Introduced mahjong and wrote a script for a black and white Pierrot show. The communist Len Wincott, later ringleader in the Invergordon Mutiny, remembered that when Dicky left the Revenge, he received such a sending off from the men that I, quote, doubt any captain ever was so spontaneously or sincerely bid bon voyage, end quote. The newlyweds miss each other enormously. Well, one of them did. On the first anniversary of their engagement, he wrote her a 24-page letter recapping their life together since they had first met and confessing to dreams about her slim legs encased in soft leather riding boots. Edwina also faced uncertainty and a need to prove herself. She'd rushed into marriage not knowing what else to do, and now faced long periods apart from Dicky as he single-mindedly pursued his naval career. She had no obvious purpose, and around £50,000 a year after tax, when £1,000 before tax was a generous income, to pursue it. So she doesn't know what to do, but she's got all the money in the world to do what she wants to do if she could just figure out what it is that she wants to be about. You know, she had been helping her grandfather, Castle, but, you know, he's passed away. More than that, though, Stella Underhill, that secretary, is really running the show at the estate. So Edwina simply occupied herself by sleeping late, shopping, playing bridge, seeing friends, attending parties, and country house weekends, and where possible, following Dicky on his naval postings. That would be fun for like half a second. I mean, I don't know. I mean, okay, I shouldn't act like I'm above it. Okay, let's say it'd be fun for a year. But then after a while, it's just like, how going out and buying things can only be fun for so long. The eating would be fun because food always tastes good. You're always going to be hungry again. But the shopping, the playing of bridge, seeing the same people over and over, staying at the country house on the weekends, like you're going to be doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. She needs to find something to do with her life. A particular pleasure was revue and cabaret shows, especially jerky, syncopated dance music, sentimental love songs, and the sound of a wailing saxophone. She was painted by the society painter Philip de Laszlo, but she felt bored and restless, her sharp brain and competitive nature not fully exercised. How could it be if your entire life was all about lunching? She'd already redecorated Brookhouse, papering and carpeting her bedroom in pale gray and installing a vast bath of Italian marble flanked by an enormous double washstand. Amongst her jars of cream and perfumed oils was a small bottle containing the blackened nerve of Dicky's left front tooth, damaged in a hunting accident in 1920. And this was a parting present before he had left for Constantinople. So, a stuffed rabbit, a toy, and his blackened front left tooth. Someone's got to take this guy to the side and maybe instruct him on gift giving. Dicky's bedroom had also been redone to resemble an officer's cabin, complete with regulation bunk, brass rail, folding washstand, the simulated noise of the throb of a ship's engine, and a porthole which, at the flick of a switch, presented a diorama of Valletta Harbor by either day or moonlight. Against a painted background was a collection of cut-out ships at 50 feet to an inch that, when darkness fell, twinkled real Morse code signals to each other. What a bedroom. I mean, it's kind of like real heavy on a theme. Do we want to be laying in bed listening to the throb of a ship's engine? Maybe. It could be. I mean, maybe he really was like that into his job that he even wanted his bedroom to reflect his work. In one corner, in a glass case, was a comforting presence of his father's hat, uniform, and decorations as First Sea Lord. In April, the Revenge docked at Plymouth, and the Mountbattens reunited at the Grand Hotel, and they began their next joint operation, a child. Dun, dun, dun! Babies. Yes, babies are coming. Shortly afterward, Edwina announced she was pregnant, so they had a real good time over there at the Grand Hotel. Another task that summer was to find a country house near Portsmouth where Revenge was now based. In May, Edwina took a 6-month lease at Maiden Castle House near Dorchester, a square, substantial brick villa with 8 bedrooms and plenty of room for Dicky's polo ponies. At the time, they cut back on their expenditure by renting out Brookhouse to Mrs. Vanderbilt. The Revenge was now at Devonport, and Edwina returned to London, where she danced every night with an old flame, Hugh Molyneux, heir to the Earl of Sefton, at a succession of nightclubs, the Riviera Club, the Grafton Galleries, or the Blue Lagoon. Pump the brakes, y'all. Her husband's away, she's pregnant, but she's hanging out with an old boyfriend dancing at clubs until like the wee hours of the morning. You know, I tell you right now, y'all, money does not buy class. What kind of behavior is this? You're going to hoist your pregnant belly all over the dance floor with the old flame, Hugh Molyneux? How about go get in the bed, lady? How about go prepare for the coming birth of this infant of yours? How about don't cheat on your husband while you're hugely pregnant with his kid? Whatever. On February 14th, Dicky, cruising with the Atlantic Fleet at Madeira, received a signal informing him of the birth of a daughter, born exactly 2 years after his engagement. She was named Patricia, after her cousin and godmother, Lady Patricia Ramsay, Edwina Victoria, after Dicky's mother. He immediately wrote to Edwina, "I could hardly hold myself in when I got the wireless message this morning saying that our daughter had been born. For a few days past, I felt convinced that it would be a girl and was praying it would be, as I think it's so much nicer to have a daughter as the first child. Then I'm a father I simply can't believe, and oh, my dear, I'm so excited I can hardly wait until I come to see her. It is thrilling, isn't it, my dear? Bless you, sweet. If anything could make me love you more dearly than I already do, it'll be our baby." Poor thing, he's so excited. Well, your baby's mother could care less. Edwina, having done her duty, quickly resolved to go back to her life of pleasure, and the baby was handed over to Nanny Woodard. Shortly afterwards, she left for dress fitting and fun with Nada in Paris, and then she stayed for a while. Amongst her new friends were Paula Gillibrand, a Vogue model, and her husband, the Marquis de Casamarie. Bobby Mari de Casa, known as the Cuban Heel, had been born in Rome but brought up in Britain. A racing driver by profession, a playboy by inclination, he and his wife dazzled Edwina. She just had a baby. Why is she in Paris making all of these friends and having dress fittings and flitting around the nightclubs? She just had a kid. Like, I find it wild that she wouldn't have any sort of maternal instinct to return to the little life that she just gave birth to, especially since the dad's nowhere to be seen. I mean, he is at work. But you know what I'm saying? It's like somebody should love on that baby, somebody that's not just the nanny. Dicky was granted leave for the christening in April at the Chapel Royal, attended by her godparents, who included the Prince of Wales. Immediately, Dicky was besotted, but Edwina was slower to appreciate their first child. Weisel, her photograph albums of 1924 have scores of pictures of her friends. There are only 9 pictures of Patricia from the first months of her life. It sometimes appeared as if the infant was simply an ornament from whom her mother was occasionally photographed for society magazines. Typical behavior. I suppose if you never really had a mother, you wouldn't even hardly know how to begin mothering any little creature of your own. You know, I do wonder how she could have managed. And even it said that when she did have a mother, it says her mother wasn't very good with her anyway. So even before her mother died, she'd not had any kind of mothering. And then she was sort of raised among, you know, with her grandfather, who he really, really loved her, but he doted on her, gave her everything she wanted, but also was extremely possessive and protective. So that's not really mothering. And then, of course, we know Molly hated her, so she wasn't going to get anything from her stepmother. Is it any wonder that she didn't know how to take care of her child? But even so, I feel like that's sort of, sort of rings false too, because there's plenty of people who didn't have good moms who really rise to the occasion when they become mothers. So I don't know what Edwina's problem was. Edwina continued her frantic social life. Wimbledon for the ladies' semifinals, Ascot for tea with the king and queen, Cowes with the Vanderbilts and Barings. There were tennis parties when the weather was fine, mahjong when wet, visits to the movies with friends such as Jean Norton and Hugh Molyneux, the occasional charity function, and every few months, shopping trips to Paris for shoes and hats and dresses. Every few months, you need new shoes, new hats, new dresses in Paris. The life that she does lead, always needing to have fun. You know, we cannot stop this whirl of gaiety. God forbid we do a little bit of work. God forbid we have a little responsibility. God forbid we take care of the life that is bleeding in the corner for us, like a little lost lamb who needs its mother. She ate little and exercised frantically. Oh, she is part of the Prince of Wales set then. Golf or tennis daily, for which she had professional coaching, and then several hours dancing each night. With the result, she remained fit and slim. She was desperate for new experiences and felt trapped by domesticity. Above all, she craved her own independence, having been denied it in her youth. In August 1924, Dicky left the Revenge, and after a week playing polo, he and Edwina joined the Prince of Wales on the Cunard liner to New York. Ostensibly, the purpose was to watch an international polo match between Britain and the United States on Long Island. But it seems like it was quite the popular event of the season. There was all sorts of famous people on board. And the author says that so popular was the crossing that it had a waiting list of 500, mainly marriageable daughters. So it might have been to watch polo, but it was something else altogether. Dicky and Edwina spent much of their time with the prince, who was traveling incognito as Lord Renfrew. They spent time playing mahjong or swimming in the liner's swimming pool, a vast cave lined with marble columns and mock Pompeian mosaics. Dicky organized a tug-of-war team from amongst the prince's staff, who naturally were allowed to win. Edwina and Jean danced the night away in the ship's nightclub. Who's taking care of the baby? Not Edwina. I don't even think she probably knows where it is. Is it even on this trip, or did they just chuck it with Nanny and told the nanny to stay back in England? Who even knows? All right, well, the royal party was staying on Long Island with James Burden, president of Burden Iron Works, the largest horseshoe and nail-producing concern in the world, and spent their time at polo, meetings, dances, dinners, and trips into New York, either by road or boat. The Prince of Wales conducted an affair with Pina Kruger, the actress wife of a New York haberdashery millionaire, while Freddie Metcalf took up with an 18-year-old dancer named Virginia Delante. What are these antics, you guys? By the way, what happened to Frida Dudley Ward? I thought he was crying into his handkerchief about her not but 2 seconds ago. I guess he's found a way to get over it with old Pina. And what is Freddie Metcalf doing with an 18-year-old dancer, sickos? All right, well, I'm sure that's like, officially, I suppose she's legal. But I'm sure we're about to get, our socks blown off in a minute. Now, you guys, trouble's brewing for Dicky's brother, Georgie. Georgie and Nada aren't getting along, you guys, because Nada has lesbian tendencies, and so she's kind of sick of Georgie. And things are under strain. Edwina was hanging out with Nada a lot because she didn't want to hang out with Georgie. And also on this trip, Dicky had been taken ill with tonsillitis, so he spent a lot of time in bed. So Georgie's wandering around wondering what happened to his marriage. Dicky's over there with the tonsillitis. And Nada and Edwina are living their best life on this ship. Edwina wasn't going to have her fun spoiled by the fact that her husband was sick. She continued to aquaplane behind fast boats, dance at parties, and stay until dawn at nightclubs in New York, accompanied by other guests. Once he recovered, Dicky gamely accompanied her, but he did not warm to Edwina's new social set, nor their night-clubbing antics. It's not his thing. He much preferred a solitary round of golf or playing with a movie projector. Yeah, they are just such a bad match, it's not even funny. Tensions built until Edwina, liberated by her newfound freedom and friends, announced that she would not be returning with Dicky, but wanted to stay on. You can go back to stodgy old Britain if you want to, but I'm not going back. I have friends here, and we're having a great time, and I don't know why you don't want to stay out till dawn dancing in nightclubs, you weirdo, but we do. You can just take your wet blanket back to England. I'm staying here having a good time. Kiss the baby hay for me. It was clear that there were problems in the marriage. Edwina needed constant reassurance, and Dicky, emotionally immature himself, did not always know how to give it. Confused by her own burgeoning emotions and newly assertive, she respected him all the less when he accepted her criticism of his various faults. Dicky returned home on the homework full of self-reproach. Okay, I have 2 things to say here. The book says that Edwina needed constant reassurance, and it was Dicky's emotional immaturity that did not know how to meet her where she was at. But I say no. I bet you anything Dicky did know that's what she needed. I think most of us know that's what people who are insecure need, the constant reassurance. But I think the thing is that Dicky wasn't willing to give it. And that can be a little bit of a sign of immaturity too. When you know what somebody needs and it wouldn't be that hard to give it to them, but it's like, no, I'm not going to. I'm not going to do, I refuse to be manipulated. But you aren't really being manipulated if you know that's what the other person is doing. So if you know it would mean something to them, throw them a bone. Say something nice to them. It's not going to ruin your day to just be a decent person. But I do understand that if it was but I do understand that Dicky would have known that he could give her the reassurance she needs, but, in 5 seconds, she's going to need it again. It's the same thing we talked about when we talked about Diana. I know that there's a lot of stuff in that book that I didn't totally agree with, but I do think that we could all collectively agree that she was a needy soul that did need reassurance from quite a few people. And so I think that it doesn't matter if you say to this person, you look really beautiful, or I really like this about you, or, you have a great conversation with them and you compliment her intelligence or whatever it is. That's not going to be enough. This is an empty well. She's going to be looking again. She's going to be crying out again for the reassurance. And maybe he was just tired. Maybe he's like, look, if I start giving you all the assurance you need, it's going to be a never-ending thing. I'm going to have to constantly come up with something new to tell you. Can't you just pull it together? So maybe he didn't know what to say, or maybe he did know what to say and he just wasn't willing to say it. But the other thing I think is really interesting here, and we already kind of talked about it at the beginning of the chapter, is that as she's beginning to have these burgeoning emotions and she's becoming newly assertive, she wants him to also become assertive as well. All of that sort of self-deprecation of I'll never be good enough for you, I'll never be good enough for you, that's kind of gross after a while. It's like, okay, well then tell me why I'm with you. Don't tell me that you're never going to be good enough, because now that makes me second guess my choice that I chose you. And I think that she probably challenged him a good bit, probably poked and prodded him, trying to get him to become bigger, to bow up, to draw himself up to his full height and really tell her how it was. I'm sure she would have thought that was attractive. There's something attractive about a man who knows his place in the world. Not a bully. I'm not talking about being a bully, but somebody who can lead effectively and who is strong and masculine and knows the right way and is willing to take the chances and is willing to take you by the hand and take you with him. But somebody who's all the day long sort of cowering in the corner and being like, I know, I'm sorry, rocking back and forth, beating himself up and just marinating in his own disgust and self-reproach. I mean, nobody wants to be married to that. Edwina remained a few more weeks enjoying her new independence, but unsure what to do with it. Attractive, rich, and vulnerable, she was surrounded by admirers who competed for her attention, which she deflected by playing them off against each other. And that, of course, annoyed everybody, because it's you can only be played for so long before you're just enough already. Annoyed, they gradually withdrew. And Edwina, knowing her little adventure was over, returned to the husband who had increasingly come to bore her. How unfortunate for Dicky. She just thinks he's so pathetic. But the problem is he agrees with it, so there's no way out. Because if everyone thinks the same thing, you're pathetic, how do we get past it? All right, that is the end of that. Thank you so much for joining me for another chapter. These are short chapters, but I'm kind of liking it because hopefully I can put out a few more this week than I did last. Thank you again for joining me. I'll see you guys soon, and let me know what you're thinking about this book. And what do we think about Edwina? I have strong feelings, as you can see. And what do we think about Dicky so far? I said it in the last episode, but I'll say it again. I am crushed by the fact that he's going to turn out to be a terrible person, because he seems so nice now. When we spend so much time in disdain and self-disgust, and we spend so much time thinking we're the worst, we're going to find ourselves in some really dark places if those places promise us that there's redemption on the other side. That if we tarry a little while here, it might be dark and twisted and not great. But if there is the hope that somebody in that scenario will see you and somebody in that scenario will give you what you need, there's a tendency to stay much longer in dark places than you should. But it all stems from this idea that I'm not good, and I need somebody to validate me. And then you can find yourself in really bad places with people whose validation isn't worth anything. And I wonder if that's maybe how Dicky found himself where he does. Who knows, but we shall see. This book is giving us a play-by-play. He hasn't left anything out, which I love. All right, see you guys soon. Bye.